According to the Gnostics, we all have three brains or intelligence centers, and they are the thinking brain, the intuitive brain, and the motor brain. And they correspond, loosely speaking, to independence of thought or clarity of thought, the instinctive faculties, and the individual will or work ethic. And it seems that most people either function from just two or even one of these, but rarely all three in unison. For example, if you function purely from the motor brain, you're at risk from doing what we call donkey's work. Now, this is typically very hard work but doesn't require any intellectual or intuitive input on our part, which is fine for a donkey, but for humans this can get very frustrating because it leaves a large part of our potential untapped. Whereas if we function purely from the intelligent or thinking brain, we're liable to become what's known as space cadets. These are people who spend a lot of time lost in conceptual thinking in their heads, and that can kind of divorce them from reality, thus making them somewhat unproductive. But most people function from two. Now, if you function from both the thinking and the motor brain, this gives rise to what we call a conventionally successful person in the West. So they have a well-trained intelligence and a work ethic, but there's still something missing, and that is, of course, the instinctive or intuitive faculties. Because they play to the corporate game in most cases, they somehow forsake that part of them, that intuitive part of their decision making. So what about the intuitive and work ethic centers? Well, here we find people who have somehow neglected their independence of thought, and so are liable to becoming brainwashed and trapped in certain belief systems. Think religious zealots or people who fall into ideologies easily. Let me reiterate, this model is not meant to be taken too literally, but it does serve to show how easily fragmented we become. But to reach our true higher potential, people have to explore the untapped parts of themselves, and this will lead the way for a person to function from all three centers in unison. And it's only then that we can become much more effective and actually function without any conflict. When we're firing on all cylinders, so to speak, we don't really experience conflict. It's only when we function in a fragmented way that we experience blockages. It's also worth mentioning that we can also fall into traps because of the situation around us. If you're at school or university, for example, this can switch the intuitive center off altogether. People can get so overly dependent on the other two, and they do that for so many years that they simply forget the middle one even exists. Now, join some religious fraternity or cult, and you can simply switch off your brain, because there's no need to think for oneself anymore. The ideologies are handed down to you, and you just accept them on face value. And lastly, if you join a benefits program, for example, you can simply switch off your work ethic because there's simply no need to use it. Again, all of these present dangers to us because we lose touch with parts of ourselves. So beware of all these traps which can coax us into false states of security. But by following our own true path, or purpose if you like, we can ensure that we're in the flow state as much as possible, and that we're using all of our faculties.
Subscribe to Infognostica to get regular updates to enlighten you and your family. Join our community while you're here. Until next time, Padawans.